Today we will be solving equations, one-step equations, either using addition, subtraction, multiplication, or division with decimals. And so let's take a look at our first problem here. And as we solve an equation, we want to do opposite operations. And the rule is an equivalency property, and that's what we're going to end up using here. And so we're going to use an equivalency property to do an operation on both sides of the equation so I don't change the value of the equation. So I want to get x by itself, but I'm adding 7 2/10 to it. So in order to get it by itself, I'm going to take away the 7 2/10 from both sides, and that'll cancel out the 7 2/10 on the left side, leaving me with x. But again, equivalency properties say that I need to do the same thing on both sides of the equal sign. So I'm going to end up having to subtract that 7 2/10 from both sides and borrow. So when I borrow from the 5, I can't quite borrow from the 5. I'm going to have to borrow from the 1 in the tens place. Change that to a 0, 15 to a 14, and then come up with my subtraction. 11 minus 2 makes 9, and 14 minus 7 makes 7, so 7 and 95 hundredths is the value of x. So looking at the next problem, I have x minus 10 4/10. So again, to do the opposite operation, to solve for x, I need to add 10 4/10, and that is that opposite operation. So I'm going to add the 10 4/10, adding the placeholders there, and then just adding to both sides. So I'm left with x equals, and then adding these numbers up, I get 5 in the hundredths place. 2 and 4 makes 6. Bring the decimal point straight down. 3 and 0 makes 3, and then bring down the 1. So 13 and 65 hundredths. Here I've got 3 hundredths times x. The number's right next to the variable, that means multiplication, and so in order to solve this, I'm going to undo it by doing division. So I'm going to divide by 3 hundredths on both sides. So when you're doing that, you're going to want to move that decimal point in the divisor so it becomes a whole number. Now, this is a 1 and 62 hundredths, and so I'm going to go ahead and move that decimal 2 spaces and do the same thing here. So when I do my problem, I'm going to set it up this way. 3 into 162. Now the decimal point is going to go at the end of the number because I had to move it over 2 spaces, just so happened to get there. And it comes straight up, and I start doing the division. So 3 into 16 goes 5 times, with 1 left over. And then 3 goes into 12. We have 4 times evenly. So I didn't even need the decimal point. So 54 is the value of x. Now I knew 3 went into this number because if you count up the digits, 1, 6, and 2, those add to make 9. 3 goes into 9, so I knew 3 would go in there. Looking at this next problem, same sort of thing. I'm going to divide by negative 1 and 7/10 on both sides. Now notice that we only have one negative sign here. This 51 hundredths is positive, so when I do the division, I'm going to end up with a negative. So I still need to move the divisor's decimal point 1 space over. Same thing here. So when I'm doing the division, I'm really doing negative 17 into 5 and 1/10. And so that decimal point is going to go straight up. And again, notice that we've got a positive or a negative into, and actually when I look at this a little bit closer, it looks like there's a negative sign right here too, and there is. Make that a negative there. And so I'm doing a negative into a negative, that makes a positive. So now I'm doing 17 into 5 goes 0 times. And then 17 into 51 goes 3 times. So I do the multiplication. 3 times 7 makes 21. 3 and 1 make 3 plus 2 makes 51. And those will subtract to make 0. So my answer is x equals 3/10. Now in this one, definitely sure here that we only have one negative sign. So when I have division, the opposite operation is to multiply. And so that's what I'm going to do. Multiply by the 3 and 2/10, and those 3 and 2/10 will cancel, leaving me just with x. So I do the same thing on this other side. And notice I have a negative 5 and 12 hundredths times by positive 3 twelfths, or 3 and 2/10. So this will give me a negative. So I just line up the multiplication. Don't have to line up decimals when you multiply, only when you add or subtract. And go ahead and multiply. So I get 4 This makes 2 and 10. Then carry down the 0, and then now I moved over one space. That's why I have that placeholder of 0. 3 times 2 makes 6. 3 times 1 makes 3. 3 times 5 makes 15. So I add those numbers up. I get 4. This makes 8. This makes 3, 6, and 1. And now I need to move the decimal point. It needs to move over 1, 2, 3 spaces. 3 numbers here after the decimal point. So that's why I'm moving over 3 spaces. So it goes back 1, 2, 3. So it's going to go right there between the 6 and the 3. Now notice, again, the answer is negative because we have just one negative. So negative 16 and 384 thousandths is the way we'll read that number. Looking at our last one here, we have a problem in which we need to move this 13 1400ths over to the other side. So notice that it's positive, so I need to subtract it from both sides. So when I subtract, I actually subtract when the numbers are opposite in sign, but they're the same sign. So same sign means that we're adding. It means add. Now again, the reason is if you look at a number line, and let's say I had negative 1 plus negative 2. If I had negative 1 plus negative 2, if I start at negative 1, here's 0, here's negative 1, I'm having to add negatives. That means I'm going further in the negative direction. So that leaves us at negative 3. So that's why I end up adding. So just need to add these numbers up. I get 4. This makes 4. Bring down the decimal point. Here I get 5 and 1. So negative 15 and 44 hundredths is the value of x. So those are the types of problems you're going to see on tonight's homework. Good luck.